from the abstract ideas to how AI can actually benefit people in their lives, their homes, their communities, and their businesses. The second point that keeps coming up is that it's not a one-size-fits-all model. I think we do need to be flexible. We need to be inclusive when we look at different AI approaches. I would say for all parts of the world, no matter where countries are in terms of their development journeys. India, as we see, is a leader, really showing how to get from AI ambitions to real results. And of course, in doing so, keeping that human-centered approach in focus, as we heard from the Prime Minister yesterday. The Bashini platform that we've also heard about delivers government services in 22 languages. I would say as well, similar AI-powered digital public infrastructure solutions in areas from healthcare to financial inclusion are really working to better serve all Indians, regardless of their economic status, their skill level, especially in rural communities. I would say, inspired by these efforts, I wanted to quickly offer 3 observations, and you've actually already referred to them. 3 observations about how we can move beyond moonshots from policy to actual practice here in the Asia-Pacific region and beyond. And they all begin with S, and you said them already: solutions, skills, and of course, standards. So solutions is about building the infrastructure and the platforms that make artificial intelligence accessible, because we cannot achieve AI for many. We can't achieve AI for all if we still have a third of humanity that is offline. Without connectivity, there is no AI, and that's why efforts like our school connectivity work with UNICEF, called the GIGA Initiative, to connect every school is so important. Our work in terms of our Partner to Connect Digital Coalition, which is about connecting the hardest to connect. We have a target of achieving 100 billion this year. So far, we're at 80 billion in commitments and pledges to connect the hardest to connect. So we need to tackle that basic infrastructure component. The second element that we need to make sure that we diffuse AI globally in practice is skills, the fundamental importance of skills. Yesterday, I was speaking to a young leader who actually likened connectivity to people feeling that they have digital agency. Skills are that engine of agency. Countries can learn directly from India's experience of investing in people, namely through its Future Skills program that's providing upskilling to support thousands of students at all levels. ITU is also taking a similar approach, and my colleague Fred will be staying on for the panel today. We have a skilling coalition that's very exciting with some, I think, 70 partners so far, bringing more than 180 different learning resources in 13 languages. And coming to my last S is that standards piece, ensuring that AI systems work effectively together. Standards complement solutions and skills, not only for interoperability, but also for embedding trust. As Prime Minister Modi mentioned yesterday, deepfakes and misinformation can destabilize entire societies, and people must be able to distinguish between real and AI-generated material. And that's why the ITU, together with our partners from ISO and IEC, we created the AI Standards Exchange database that has over 850 standards and technical publications, including multimedia authenticity standards that prioritize traceability to combat deepfakes. ITU standards are voluntary. They are developed through an inclusive multi-stakeholder process. So, ladies and gentlemen, AI diffusion isn't about everyone using the same technology. It's about giving everyone the same bridge to opportunity and refusing to let the digital divide become an AI divide. So today's playbook is going to help us really build that bridge, as will our continued cooperation and collaboration on AI solutions, skilling, and standards. In all of these areas, you can count on ITU as your trusted partner. Thank you.
Thanks, Doreen. As you can see, Doreen has spent her career in ensuring every country, every community has access to or is part of digital economy. Could I just invite Doreen, Fred, Rachel, Brando, Dr. Panniselvan on the stage as we launch the Global South AI Diffusion Playbook. It's a framework built around 5 interacting dimensions: infrastructure, data and trust, institutions for procurement, and market skills and market shaping. It's not designed as a strategy document, but more as an implementation guide, because the next phase of AI is not about moonshots, it's about how do we ensure AI works reliably, inclusively, and productively for many. This is, I think, the photo op you guys were waiting for. So, all yours. I'll leave the QR code there. Anybody wants to download that. Doreen, I know you have to leave. Thank you very much. Thanks for a great keynote as well. Thanks, Doreen. Thank you. Just 2 seconds. If diffusion is about moving from capability to real economic impact, then startups are obviously the transmission mechanism. And a few people understand India's startup ecosystem as deeply as Dr. Panniselvam Madan Gopal, CEO of Meeti Startup Hub. Under his leadership, Meeti Startup Hub has become a key platform connecting government policy with entrepreneurial energy, enabling innovations to move from lab to market and from pilot to scale. Over 6,000 plus startups, right? So he brings over 2 decades of experience, and at a moment when India is positioning itself not just as an AI adopter, but as an AI innovation diffusion hub, his perspective on enabling startup to scale responsibly and globally is particularly valuable. Doctor, could I just have a few minutes for you?
Thank you, Access Partnership, for having me this afternoon for this conversation. I think it's an important element. How do you, there's so much happening in the last 4 to 5 days in Delhi, in Bharat Mandapam. It's important to get a grasp of what's going on, right? And what each of us have to kind of take away from this, and how each stakeholders in this ecosystem can help us, and startups become a very, very important player in this game, and essentially for 2 or 3 key reasons. And one, they come in as AI natives. They come in with a significant understanding of the technology, and the talent is kind of already there. And then second, they are here to the agility that they bring, in the capability they bring to kind of transform businesses, is becoming a very, very important need for small and medium enterprises, and even to large enterprises. Just prior to this, I was having a conversation with a large corporate, and how they can actually use startups as a catalyst of change and transformation in their large corporate, because the corporates are designed for systems and processes on scale, and what need of the hour is actually agility, adaptability, and more importantly, ability to change and bring innovation into a mainstream of any enterprise. So startups play a very, very critical role. So we at Meeti Startup Hub are primarily driving the push to kind of ensure that startups have the wherewithal and the capability to drive and back this change that is required by the corporate ecosystem or the large enterprise ecosystem. Briefly, what do we do at MeitY Startup Hub? We are the custodians of the deep tech startups in the country. This whole event has been put together by MeitY and of course Ministry of External Affairs been phenomenal partners in this. So our role in MeitY Startup Hub is essentially 3 M's: mentorship, market access, and money. Right? This is essentially what we provide for startups. We provide mentorship support to the entire journey from almost at an ideation stage to Series A, up to Series A level, and we have them. We provide them with market access. I'm a firm believer that your customer is your best investor if you're a startup, and finding customers for startups is more important than finding investors, right? So it's important for me to give them the right market access support. So we work with large corporates across the board, across the country, and internationally we kind of drive market access support. And last but not the least, money. We provide significant amount of. So there is absolutely no dearth of capital in the Indian market. Through my agent, through my organization, MeitY Startup Hub, we fund almost up to 1,000 crores for startups, and the India AI mission has another almost about 8,000 crores to be funded for funding for startups. So there is absolutely no dearth of money in the market. Government fund is available, private capital is available. So that's what we support. And our endeavor is to ensure that startups are at the heart of this renaissance or this change that is kind of happening in the ecosystem, and how startups technology can power help this small and medium enterprises and large enterprises transform in their technology journey. So that's what we have been driving at, and conversations like this help a lot and enabling them to drive this change. We have 3 things. I mean, there is obviously a lot of challenges. It's not easier said than done. In some cases, I was reading up. In a way, with medium enterprises, as we call a technology overshoot. The technology has actually overshot the need, and now the ability of the medium enterprises to cope with this technology and say, how do I understand what is my need? How do I integrate this into my business need, and how do I ensure that this business, my business kind of is realigned with a new workflow, a new way of doing business with this current technology, with AI or AI based supported technology to kind of drive. So there is while there are huge challenges, but there is every challenge is an opportunity. So and startups are very well placed to kind of bridge that opportunity because they understand technology and they understand business. So we are hoping to create this what I call the AI bridge now, which is kind of bridge the technology and the business need, and it's going to be a huge opportunity by itself to kind of drive, and startups is what we are hoping will build that bridge and drive the change. So at MeitY Startup Hub, our endeavor is to nurture, build, and enable tech and deep tech startups in the country, and we partner with we collaborate with all stakeholders, domestic and international, to ensure our startups get the right opportunities, and we solve problems and we enable capability through building capacity. So that's essentially in a nutshell what we do, and once again I thank the Access partners for providing me this opportunity to briefly share my thoughts with you. And we are in a cusp of somebody called this an AI earthquake happening in Bharat Mandapam. This is a tectonic shift, and this is laying foundation for something big and better coming our way, of course with a lot of responsibility also, because everything has 2 sides of its own. So we need to be extremely responsible in what we are doing with the technology. Thank you once again. Thank you for the opportunity.
Could I As Doctor said, this is really the earthquake of AI, and we are at the epicenter. And as you can see, after 5 days, we are all very, very tired. We started late, we'll end on time. That's my promise to you guys. Where's the next chair? So let me introduce our panelists very quickly. Dr. Rachel Adams, she's the founder and CEO of the Global Center on AI Governance, a leading research and policy institution focused on ensuring that AI development and deployment advance equity and human rights globally. She also advises governments, and she was a key contributor to the African Union Commission's Continental AI Strategy. I have Fred Werner. He is the Chief of Strategy and Operations for AI for Good and Chief of Strategic Engagement at ITU. He's based in Geneva, but as a co-creator of the AI for Good Global Summit, which is happening from 7 to 10 July in Geneva. Yes. He brings together a global hub for collaboration, standards, and actionable AI-driven impact. And I'm also pleased to welcome Brando Benefi, who is a member of European Parliament, and he was a co-rapporteur of the EU AI Act, which we all love so much, the world's first comprehensive AI regulation. He is an Italian MEP since 2014, and he has played a key role in shaping European digital and AI policy. Welcome, all of you. Quick one, yeah. I'll maybe start with you, Brando, in this case. We talked about concrete gains that AI diffusion can unlock in Global South over the next 3 to 5 years. How do we move from pilots to scale deployment? I want to understand a bit more from you. It's been a while since we have had the EU AI Act. There have been some implementation, obviously, right? So how do you see the AI diffusion being unlocked, and how do you see European partnerships with the Global South there?
Well, first of all, I apologize for my voice, but it's the, I don't know, work of these days. Maybe we are producing a lot, but this is the also the impact, so I apologize for that. But to answer your question, I think that the EU AI Act can be an interesting reference point to reflect on what we can do to implement the idea of a global diffusion, especially looking at the Global South. Because in fact, even the so-called global north or global minority, we can use different terms, is still struggling with the diffusion of AI among different actors. If you look at the data, for example, on the diffusion among small and medium-sized enterprises, most north of the world countries, they still have very low numbers because of lack of trust, because of lack of AI literacy, because of lack of systems that facilitate understanding on how the usage of AI can ameliorate the activity of a business, a public organization, a civil society reality, etc. So the AI Act is a legislation that doesn't create a comprehensive framework that is vague, comprehensive but confusing maybe. Instead, it chooses to identify a series of high-risk areas of usage of AI, and lets instead all the non-included use cases to not be regulated further than the existing legislation. Why I'm saying this? Because I think that to overcome one of the issues, obviously when we look at the issue of diffusion, there are many elements, infrastructure, as I said, literacy, but on the issue of trust and on risk management, I think the EU AI Act is an interesting reference point on having clear boundaries where we do not think we need more regulation where we let the systems be used freely, where we want checks and balances to be in place, where we even choose to prohibit certain use cases, and where we need transparency, which is still a lacking element in many of our experiences with AI. So I think that in the difference of the context, these elements are quite relevant for even a context that is clearly different from the average European country. But I think that to build trust, we need to clarify where we want governance and limits to be in place, and send a clear message to the population that even when we concentrate on use cases, on action, this is the topic of the summit, we can also build in a smart way, in a clear way, not light, but clear, clarity, elements of protection, of guarantee that can create more trust in the adoption.
Brando, I know why your voice is like that, because people want to hear more from you. So that's why you will have a busy day today as well. I'm sure people want to talk a lot to you. Rachel, coming to you, I think Brando talked about an important point about the trust and clarity, and you have worked extensively with global South countries, right? So how crucial do you think are trust and ethics for diffusion? How do you see that actually getting implemented in practice?
Yeah, I think it is going to take far more work than perhaps we feel it might. So, Brando, I think you mentioned some very important points around public awareness and understanding. In South Africa, the centre I lead, the Global Centre on AI Governance, conducted a very comprehensive public perception survey in the country. We interviewed over 3,000 South Africans from all walks of life, all demographic groups. We interviewed them in their own language. We have over 11 official languages in South Africa, and 2/3 of South Africans do not have a meaningful grasp of AI. So 1/3 of South Africans have never heard of AI, and another third of South Africans have heard of it but could not begin to tell you what it meant at all. So I think if we're thinking about the relationship between the large-scale private investments we're seeing in AI diffusion, the large-scale public plans we have around AI adoption in relation to where the public sits, what their kind of levels of understanding, awareness, and literacy is. This is creating a very significant democratic gap, particularly where a lot of these adoption pathways are around the use of AI in the public service. If people don't know about these technologies, they don't know about the risks, they don't know about the opportunities, they're not able to contest it, they're not able to participate in decision making, we have a real problem. So diffusion cannot be something that is only about putting in place the infrastructure that sees forward technical delivery and access. It must be scaled with governance efforts.
Yep. No, I think, Brando, we had that whole discussion separately where you talked about that getting technology in the hand of people doesn't matter if you're using it for a lot of autocratic rules, like for example, social scoring, right? So I think maybe going to you, Fred, on this point, looking at the positive side of the story, you talked about that day, AI for good or AI for good. So how do you, some of the use cases and standards that you think are really setting the stage for helping drive the diffusion?
Yeah, so I think there's no shortage of high potential AI for good use cases, especially now in 2026. That maybe wasn't the case in 2017 when we created AI for good, but we've really seen things go from the hype, the fear of a promise, mainly existing in fancy marketing slides, to the advent of Gen AI, the rise of AI agents, and now the physical manifestation of AI in the form of robotics, embodied AI, brain-computer interface technologies, and even space AI computing, right? And just to give you an example, we have an AI startup innovation factory that runs all year. And there was an Estonian startup that had a very interesting application that can basically tell how much sugar is in your blood based on the sound of your voice using a mobile phone and detecting voice patterns, right? Now, this could be a game changer for diabetes. I mean, it's a nasty global disease. Taking your blood sugar is expensive, inconvenient, sometimes painful. It's a real pain. Right now it's still a pilot, but you see the potential for scale. But on the other hand, if it can tell how much sugar is in your blood, what else can it tell about you? How late did you stay up last night? What did you have for dinner? Are you on medication? Did you have too much wine? Are you paying attention? Actually, are you paying attention? So you can see where it goes, right? So you can't take it for granted that these applications will develop in the right way, and we'll be mindful of a lot of things we were talking about here all week. Are these solutions, are they safe? Are they secure? Do they have ethics baked in? Do they respect human rights? Are they designed with participation from the global south at the table? Are they sustainable when it comes to energy and all types of things? And one way to, I guess, bake that in could be with standards. It's not the only solution. But when you look at these fast emerging governance frameworks popping up all around the world, of course you have the EU AI Act, you have different frameworks from around the world. I think one of the tricks is you don't have a one-size-fits-all, and AI is moving very, very fast. But there are many practical things that can start to be implemented. So how do you take these ambitious words and texts and turn them from principles to implementation? Because the devil is in the details, and standards have details. So I think when we're at the point where these products, services, companies, applications, even hardware, all these things need to start to interface and they need to interact internationally and sometimes intranationally as well. You're going to need standards to basically make these things work. And that could be one of a way of baking in all of the common sense things into standards. Now, I know the words lightning speed and standards development are not often used in the same sentence, and that's probably a fair statement. But I think in the case of AI, for example, when the Global Digital Compact launched its call, I believe 2 years ago in the fall, it took ITU and its partners less than 3 weeks to respond to that call for international AI standards coordination by launching the International AI Standards Summit Series. And actually, the very first one was held in this venue in 2024 as part of WTSA, our treaty setting conference on standards. And we also launched the International AI Standards Exchange Database, which Doreen mentioned a few minutes ago. But more importantly, when you're looking at the standards gaps and what people should be working on, we're working with our partners ISO and IC on multimedia content authenticity standards development. That's a fancy way of saying deepfake detection standards. I'm not saying we've solved the puzzle, but there's a lot of energy and work working with industry, C2PA, different bodies there. I think another major gap, which is not only standards related, is of course the skills gap. So when we had our governance day in Geneva last year with ministers from over 100 countries, there's a lot of things they couldn't agree on, but one thing they all agreed on is how to address the AI skills gap and democratize access to skills globally. And that didn't matter if you were a developing or a developed country. And then, of course, the other was how do you handle the epidemic of deepfakes. So I think I'll pause there, thank you. But hopefully that gives a kind of picture of how you can go from AI use cases to high potential, looking at the dual nature of AI, and how standards can be one of the tools to help address those issues. Thanks.
Thanks, Fred. I mean, if that app looks at me right now, I think it's going to tell me that I'm very caffeinated and sleep deprived. But on that point, I think standards are obviously the physical manifestation of governance. I think we did talk about that. That's very important. And Rachel, maybe I'll come back to you. I think we do talk about policy tools are important, financing mechanisms are important, governance approaches, because there are many different approaches to AI governance throughout the world. How do you see that the participatory, whether the governance is actually participatory today? Some of the frameworks from Global North, do you think that's getting imposed on South, or South is coming up, Global South is coming up with their own frameworks? How do you see the situation on the ground?
Well, I think we're at an interesting time globally. We obviously see the EU having this kind of rights focus, regulatory focus. We see the US moving very far away from regulation and wanting to really focus on innovation and markets. And we see China having a more kind of state-coordinated approach to AI governance. I think what we're seeing across the global south, and countries like India are a very good example of this, is starting from a different place, which is not around how do we build the biggest, most powerful technologies, but how do we build AI that is safe and fair and useful for our particular context? How do we use it to help advance developmental outcomes or public value? So I think we can see from those kind of three regulatory or governance approaches from EU, China, and the US, there's this very kind of pragmatic adoption of different elements of that within different global south regimes. I know with the African Union's Continental Charter on AI, they were very, very deliberate to include the word regulation, and there was a huge emphasis on human rights and on gender issues and on children's rights. So I think that what we want is to have maybe less of a focus on global consensus than I think we're often talking about, partly because interoperability can often mean the dominance of one particular region or worldview's regulatory regime everywhere else. And we've seen with the GDPR, for example, that has had a limiting effect on the African continent. So I think we rather want to be seeing kind of a global consensus around a set of principles: accountability, transparency, safety, and human oversight. And of course a set of standards, but noting that different regions are going to need to adapt those standards in different ways. Sometimes those standards might be a kind of gold standard, and sometimes they might need to be a minimum standard, and we want to be thinking more about the capacity building approaches to try and meet that standard. One of the things we are worried about from a global south and an African perspective is that standard setting processes in the past have always been dominated by those with the time and the resources to really participate in them. As you said, they're slow, and they're deliberately slow because there's a lot of expertise we need to bring to the table, and once they're concretized and finalized, they become binding in their own way, particularly on the technical side. So we really want to ensure that as we're building out these standards, particularly for generative AI and agentic AI, which is still in formation and that is a socio-technical technology, and it devolves and it evolves as it is used in context. But we have representation from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia that is meaningfully included in these standards processes through deliberate funding, through leadership on committees, through co-authorship of these standards. So I think that's very important to stress.
Yep. No, I think that's an interesting point of view, because I'm based in Singapore, so we have 11 countries in the Southeast Asia region, and everybody runs at their own pace. And everything we talk about is how do we go from starting point. A lot of it is about where do you start, and then talk about where do you end, and what's the process along the way. I think that's what you are effectively talking about. But Brando, I'll maybe let you respond to some of the points she raised about the regulatory experience that you have had. You have talked to people here, obviously, and you would have talked to other people. There is always tension between local adaptation versus harmonization. Should we have a single set of rules throughout the world? What are some of the aspects or highlights that you want to maybe highlight in that sense?
Well, first of all, on the standards, I think it's a fact that we need to accelerate on that, and that we have seen some voluntary delaying. I have to be very frank, because I look at the implementation of the AI Act, where we didn't need standards. So when we decided that some use cases, you mentioned social scoring, but I can tell you, predictive policing, emotion recognition in workplaces and study places, these are use cases, including, if I may also mention, manipulative subliminal techniques that are prohibited, and they didn't need standards. Guidelines on application of these prohibitions were sufficient, and we are already implementing that. While other parts of the law, for example, adequacy of data for training or levels of cybersecurity that are deemed sufficient These are elements, parameters for the high-risk use case applications where you need standards. Otherwise, you can't apply these rules. And the standards are being, in my view, based on the elements I got from those in the standardization process, sometimes deliberately delayed because there are some private sector actors that don't want these standards to be there. And so we need to build mechanisms. I will not delve into that for time reasons, but mechanisms that we are building also in the European context to make it sure that there is a time limit for the standards to be in place. Because otherwise certain aspects of the governance will not be possible to be implemented. I want to pick up briefly on also what you said on the risk of AI being used for, in fact, non-democratic developments, in fact, to restrict participation spaces, freedoms. I think this is especially important when we look at fragile, institutionally fragile contexts, which are often countries of the global majority, global south, how you want to call it. We need to be aware that AI can be used for mass surveillance easily, for repression of freedoms, and to put people under a pervasive control, even without them fully understanding it. I think that we should know that, and at the same time, and I fully share the spirit of the summit, concentrate on what we can do for good, as to mention the summit, because a lot of things, the example that was just made, but yesterday I was meeting with a company from my own country, from Italy, that is here, that deals with systems to anticipate physical status of drivers to prevent accidents due to physical fatigue, to make it easier to identify earlier this kind of situations that would lead to actually a car accident. So even in very specific areas, we can find in a myriad ways how we can use AI for good. But my point is that enthusiasm for diffusion should not be in a substitution for building frameworks that, I insist on my previous point, are precise and not generical ethical appeals, which, to be frank, are not very useful if they are not pointing to clear deliverables. I want to conclude on this point to be clear that I think an ethical approach is needed. Without ethical approaches, any rule will not be able to function. But if you substitute regulation, governance of all kinds, it can be more binding or more, I would say, co-legislation, co-decision processes. But if you substitute these completely with mere voluntary ethical frameworks, I'm not sure we are getting anywhere, especially, I insist, in contexts that might be more institutionally, socially fragile.
I think AI for good always starts with AI not for bad. That's always the starting point, and that's an important consideration. I did promise you guys I'll leave you on time, so I'll just have to do very quick 2 questions. I just need 30 seconds to 60 seconds responses. Fred, I'll start with you. If you had $1 billion to accelerate AI diffusion across developing economies, where will you start?
I think education, skills. I think that's really the starting point. Actually, I was in Johannesburg, South Africa, for AI for Good Impact Africa, and I had there's a lot of conversations about using the whole mobile payment revolution of East Africa leapfrogging decades of infrastructure. Could the same thing be done with AI in Africa? I haven't made up my mind on it yet. Depending on who you talk to, you might be convinced or not. I think the opportunity is there, but also you can't take it for granted that even if that did happen, it would go in the right direction. And I think that sort of basic understanding, whether it's for children, for diplomats, from grade school to grad school, that skills gap is massive. And I think that would probably be the best spend of money to start there.
Brando, what will you do with $1 billion?
I would say I subscribe to Fred's priority, because I think that literacy, understanding, build consciousness, building capacity also among civil society actors is extremely important when we see a big acceleration of development of AI as it's happening around us. Thank you.
No, I completely agree on the digital literacy, because I think one of the biggest risks we face, which we haven't spoken much about, is labour displacement, which I think is going to become significantly more serious. The other thing I would do is invest in building the capacity of our state institutions, of our independent institutions of democracy, our competitions commissions, our gender equality commissions, our human rights commissions, our information regulators. Those are the bodies that will be able to champion the rights of citizens in the face of big tech monopolies.
I would have personally bought the shares of all the company CEOs who were here yesterday. But thank you for that. Quick question, Rachel, while I have you. You have spent this week in India. You have seen the entire thing. You have seen the energies around this. What is one lesson you learned from India which you think we should deploy globally?
I think India has made it very, very clear that AI is and for everyone. I think compared to any of the other summits I've been to, I think it's wonderful that there are children from schools here, that we have so many people that are local that have come to the summit and feel included. I think feeling like I am in India at the Indian summit has been the biggest kind of heartening and exciting thing for me.
Fred?
Yeah, thanks. I've been super inspired to just hear the story of how India was able to, through 1 billion plus people, create digital ID, financial inclusion, digital payments. So there's a track record of, let's say, technology diffusion at scale, but in a way that's beneficial for everyone. So that could be a good model for AI diffusion. I know there's still a long road to go, but if you can do it in India for 1 billion plus people, I think it should work in smaller places as well.
Brando, with whatever is left in your voice now.
Well, I think we can learn a lot from what we are seeing here in these days, and I'm convinced that we need to be determined in building more global cooperation. I don't think we can get the best out of AI diffusion if we abandon the path of building a more common understanding and learning from each other. I think this summit can be a moment of this process, but this is something that must happen during all the year.
No, I think thanks to all of you. I mean, my lesson was obviously shake hands with your enemies, even if you are. That's the only way to do diffusion in across the world. So I'd like to thank all the panelists. Thank you very much, and Brando especially with your voice giving away. I hope you have a good stay, and thanks for enjoying and joining the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have to go to another meeting. No, I need to go now. Okay, no worries. I will talk to you. Okay.
person who's in charge of skills development in Geneva.